Have you ever noticed how the mind punishes itself for seeking relief? You look up, the room has grown dark, and hours have silently vanished. The day has slipped through your fingers like dry sand, and almost instantly, a heavy, familiar voice begins to echo in the silence of your mind. It tells you that you have failed again. It whispers that you lack focus, that you are undisciplined, that you are simply wasting the precious gift of your life. You sit alone, surrounded by the quiet reminders of everything you meant to accomplish, feeling the crushing weight of your own disappointment. It is an exhausting, invisible ritual. You lose yourself in distraction, running away from the quiet anxieties of the day. And when you finally return to the present moment, you are met with a profound sense of self-loathing. You make silent, desperate promises to yourself. You vow that tomorrow will be different. Tomorrow, you will be relentless. Tomorrow, you will force yourself to be perfect. But when tomorrow arrives, the pressure feels even heavier. So you retreat again. You seek the comforting numbness of distraction, only to burn once more in the fire of your own regret. 1. The trap of the shame cycle. Here is the truth few people want to face. We mistakenly believe that if we are cruel enough to ourselves, we will finally become disciplined. We treat ourselves as an enemy that must be conquered. We use shame as a whip, hoping it will somehow drive us forward. Buddhist wisdom teaches a very different approach. It reminds us of the profound teaching of the second arrow. The first arrow is the initial event, the moment you lost your focus, the afternoon spent drifting away. The reality of that lost time is the first arrow. But the second arrow is the one we shoot into our own hearts. The second arrow is the shame, the guilt, the relentless inner criticism. The Buddha taught that while we cannot always avoid the first arrow, the second arrow is optional. Imagine a traveler who wanders off a clear road and gets lost in a thick, dark forest. Instead of calmly stopping to look for the path back, the traveler begins to strike themselves with branches, screaming at their own foolishness. The punishment does not magically reveal the way home. It only leaves the traveler bruised, exhausted, and even more deeply lost in the shadows. This is exactly what happens when you try to use shame as fuel. Think about your own life. When you avoid a difficult task, when you seek out meaningless noise instead of doing the work you know you should do, how do you react? Do you speak to yourself with the firm, guiding voice of a wise teacher or the harsh, unforgiving tone of a judge? Shame is a terrible motivator. It creates a heavy, fearful environment inside your own mind, and eventually your mind will desperately want to escape that painful environment, driving you right back into the arms of the very distraction you were trying to avoid. Ask yourself, has the guilt ever truly worked? Has punishing your own spirit ever brought you a lasting sense of focus, or has it only made the work feel like an impossible mountain? You do not have to live in this exhausting loop. The next time you wake up from hours of distraction, do not immediately reach for the weapon of shame. Stop, breathe, look at your hands, feel the ground beneath your feet, and simply observe the reality of the moment without judgment. Let the feeling rise without making it your identity. Say to yourself, I drifted away. Now, I am returning. Because true discipline is not a state of unbroken perfection. It is simply the practice of returning to your center over and over again without anger. But to let go of this anger, we must first understand why our minds reach for punishment in the first place. 2. Why punishment is a broken engine. There is a dangerous belief that has taken root in our modern lives. We have been taught, often by the structures of our society, that we are machines. We believe that if we are not productive, we are broken. And when we find ourselves drifting into hours of mindless distraction, we treat that lapse as a mechanical failure that must be corrected with force. We think that if we are harsh enough, if we are cruel enough in our self-talk, we will finally snap into the alignment we desire. We assume that shame is the oil that keeps the engine running. But this is a profound misunderstanding of how the human spirit actually works. Think about this. When you hate yourself for failing to focus, you are not actually finding more energy to work. You are spending your precious, limited energy on the act of suffering. You are exhausted by the distraction, and then you are even more exhausted by the loathing that follows. You are pouring your remaining resources into a fire that only burns you, leaving nothing left to build the life you truly want. Buddhism teaches us the wisdom of the middle way. It is a path that rejects the extremes of self-indulgence and self-torture. Just as a string on a musical instrument, if pulled too tight, will eventually snap, so too does the mind. If it is pulled too loose, it produces no music. Most of us, when we realize we have been distracted, pull the string of our discipline so tightly that it threatens to break. We demand perfection, and when we inevitably fail to reach it, we snap. We lose our composure. We give up entirely. Imagine a gardener who finds a young plant wilting in the heat. Does this gardener scream at the plant? Does the gardener insult it for being weak? Does the gardener rip the leaves off in a desperate attempt to force them to grow faster? Of course not. That would destroy the plant. The gardener looks for the cause. Is the soil dry? Is there enough shade? Is there a pest nearby? The gardener responds with care, with patience, and with understanding of the plant's needs. Your mind is that garden. When you find yourself lost in distraction, scrolling endlessly, avoiding your duties, hiding from the world, you are like that wilting plant. You are struggling, you are suffering, but instead of looking at the soil of your life, you are choosing to be the gardener who screams. You are throwing salt on the earth and wondering why nothing grows. Ask yourself, if a friend came to you, exhausted and overwhelmed, telling you they had lost their focus, would you berate them? Would you call them lazy or worthless? If you would not treat a friend that way, why do you think it is acceptable to treat yourself with such profound cruelty? The only reason we do this is because we believe that our own self-hatred is a form of discipline. We have been conditioned to believe that if we aren't hurting, we aren't learning. But this is a lie. Discipline is not a form of self-punishment. Discipline is a form of self-respect. It is the ability to connect with your own purpose, even when the path is difficult. When you use shame as your fuel, you are building an association in your mind that says, working on my goals is a place where I get hurt. And if your mind believes that working leads to pain, it will do everything in its power to protect you from that pain by keeping you distracted. Stop for a moment. Instead of looking at your distraction as a moral failing, look at it as a signal. What are you actually feeling in the moments before you turn away from your work? Is it fear? Is it fatigue? Is it the heavy weight of an expectation you aren't sure you can meet? You do not have to fix it all in one moment. The engine does not need to be forced. It needs to be understood. But to understand it, we have to stop trying to drive the car into the wall. We have to look at why we were running away in the first place. 3. Escapism as a cry for rest. What if the hours you lose to distraction are not a sign of laziness, but a desperate plea from an exhausted spirit? When we look at our own escapism, we usually see only failure. We see the time wasted staring at a screen, the neglected tasks, the quiet evasion of our daily responsibilities. We label ourselves as lazy. We believe we simply lack the willpower to push through the day. But here is the truth. Laziness is often just a mask, worn by extreme mental fatigue. When you find yourself completely unable to focus, constantly reaching for any small distraction, your mind is not trying to ruin your life. It is trying to protect you from an overwhelming pressure. It is stealing the rest that you refuse to freely give it. Buddhist wisdom teaches us to look deeply at the roots of our actions, through the lens of compassion. When we observe our suffering without judgment, we begin to see the hidden truths behind our habits. Escapism is a form of clinging, yes, but it is clinging to a temporary shelter. If you do not offer your mind true rest, the kind of rest found in deep stillness and silence, it will desperately seek artificial rest in the endless noise of distraction. Imagine a traveler walking through a blazing, sunlit desert. The traveler refuses to stop, believing that stopping is a sign of weakness. But eventually, the heat becomes too much. The exhausted traveler finally collapses, not under a grand, cooling tree, but beneath a brittle, thorny bush. The shade is poor, and the thorns are sharp, but the traveler stays there because it is the only immediate relief available. Your distraction is that thorny bush. It does not truly nourish you. It does not restore your energy. In fact, losing yourself in mindless tasks often leaves you feeling more drained and hollow than before. Yet, you retreat there because you have not allowed yourself a true sanctuary. In our fast-moving world, we are taught to feel guilty for simply sitting still. We feel we must constantly prove our worth by producing something of value. And because we are not allowed to truly rest in the open, we hide in the thorny shade of our own evasions. Think about your own life. When the sudden urge to escape arises, what is actually happening beneath the surface? Are you truly lazy? Or are you carrying a weight you have not yet acknowledged? Are you avoiding a conversation because it hurts too much? Are you losing hours to noise because the silence of your own mind has become too painful to sit with? The next time you catch yourself drifting into that hollow space of distraction, do not panic. Do not instantly pull the heavy chains of discipline to drag yourself back. Pause. Breathe. Ask yourself softly, what am I trying to escape right now? Offer yourself a few minutes of true stillness. Close your eyes. Let go of the need to be productive. Give yourself permission to be entirely still. Stop forcing the mind to run when it is gently begging you to sit down, because true discipline cannot grow in exhausted soil. Before you can build a focused life, you must first make peace with the mind that is simply asking for shelter. And this brings us to the next profound illusion we must break. 4. The illusion of the perfect day. What if your greatest enemy is not your distraction, but your own impossible expectation of perfection? You wake up with a quiet promise to yourself. You carry a vision in your mind of a flawless schedule. You will be entirely focused. You will not waste a single second. You will be the most disciplined version of yourself. But then, life happens. You hesitate. You lose 20 minutes to the glowing screen of your phone. You let your thoughts drift. And in that very moment, a subtle shift occurs inside you. The illusion of the perfect day shatters. Because the morning is no longer flawless, a heavy voice tells you that the entire day is ruined. You surrender the rest of your afternoon, deciding that since you cannot be perfect, you might as well not try at all. You tell yourself that you will simply start fresh tomorrow. Here is the truth. We use the fantasy of tomorrow as an excuse to abandon today. Buddhist wisdom teaches us the profound danger of rigid attachment. When we cling tightly to a specific image of how our day must look, we create our own suffering. We refuse to accept reality as it actually unfolds. Buddhism reminds us that life is deeply impermanent, fluid, and constantly shifting. When we demand that our focus remains unbroken and our energy remains endless, we are fighting against the natural, uneven rhythm of being human. We attach our entire self-worth to a fragile, unbending plan. And when that plan inevitably breaks, we break with it. Imagine a river flowing steadily toward the vast ocean. A river does not move in a perfectly straight line. It is forced to bend around ancient, heavy rocks. It slows down in shallow, muddy pools. Sometimes, A storm rises and disturbs its calm surface, filling the water with fallen branches. But the river does not stop and declare itself a failure. It does not try to flow backward to start over perfectly. It does not judge the rocks or the rain. It simply continues moving, accepting the shape of the earth, gracefully flowing forward from exactly where it is. We try to force our lives to be straight, unbroken lines. When you encounter a rock, an unexpected distraction, a moment of weakness, an hour lost to overthinking, you completely stop. You let a small detour convince you that the entire journey is ruined. You forget that the river of your day is still flowing. You do not have to wait for a new sunrise. To find your way back to the water, ask yourself, how many hours have you abandoned simply because the morning did not go exactly as planned? Why do you believe that a day must be flawless to be meaningful? What are you afraid will happen if you accept your own clumsy, imperfect progress? Stop trying to rewrite the past hours. Pause. Breathe. Release the heavy need for a clean slate. You do not need to wait for tomorrow to begin again. You can begin again in this very breath. If you stumble at noon, gently stand up and start walking at 1 o'clock. Do not punish the afternoon for the mistakes of the morning, because peace is not found in an unbroken streak of absolute focus. It is found in the quiet, gentle resilience of starting over, again and again, without a single drop of self-hatred. But to start over gracefully, we must first learn how to forgive the mind when it inevitably wanders away. And this is where the real practice begins. What if the natural wandering of your mind is not a flaw to be eradicated, but a wild force you have simply been taught to fear? Most people do not realize that their deepest frustration does not come from the distraction itself. It comes from the violent shock of waking up to it. You sit down to do meaningful work, and for a few minutes you are perfectly aligned. But then, quietly and without warning, the mind drifts. It remembers a past conversation. It worries about a future obligation. It seeks the quick, shallow comfort of a glowing screen. When you finally snap back to reality, you do not just return to your work. You return with a heavy, swinging hammer. You mentally strike yourself, furious that you could not keep your thoughts chained to the desk. You believe that a disciplined mind is a motionless mind, and anything less is an unforgivable failure. But here is the truth. The nature of the mind is to move. One of the deepest lessons of Buddhism is the understanding of non-resistance. In Buddhist thought, attempting to stop the mind from generating thoughts is as futile as attempting to stop the ocean from generating waves. True mindfulness is not the forceful silencing of the brain. It is the gentle observation of its movement. When the mind wanders, it is not betraying you. It is simply doing what minds have done for thousands of years. The suffering only begins when you attach your ego to that wandering and demand that the mind act like an unfeeling machine. Imagine a person standing on a high hill, looking up at a vast, beautiful blue sky. Suddenly, a dark, jagged cloud drifts into view. The person becomes enraged. They begin screaming at the cloud, demanding that it leave. They wave their arms frantically, throwing stones at the sky, exhausting themselves in a desperate attempt to chase the cloud away. But the cloud does not care about the stones or the screaming. It will simply drift at its own pace. The person's anger does not change the sky. It only destroys their own peace. Your distractions are just clouds drifting across the open sky of your awareness. When you are sitting at your desk and the sudden urge to check your phone arises, or when your thoughts drift toward an anxious fear, you often become that person on the hill. You throw stones of shame at your own wandering thoughts. You spend precious energy fighting the cloud rather than simply letting it pass. Think about your own life. When you catch yourself losing focus, what is your immediate reaction? Do you gently guide yourself back, or do you instantly declare war on your own mind? Is this constant internal violence actually helping you focus, or is it just making the sky of your mind a terrifying place to live? You do not need to fight the clouds. The next time you realize you have drifted away, do not tighten your fists. Pause, breathe, acknowledge the distraction without a single ounce of judgment. You might even silently say to yourself, "Ah, the mind has wandered again." Then, with the absolute gentleness of holding a fragile object, bring your attention back to the work in front of you. Do this 100 times a day if you must. Let the thought rise and let it go, because a mind that is constantly punished will eventually refuse to return to you, but a mind that is forgiven will slowly learn to stay. But to build this kind of lasting, gentle focus, you must first learn how to master the crucial space between an impulse and a reaction. And this is where the next truth begins. 6. The pause before reaction. What if the battle for your time is not lost in the hours of distraction, but in the single, silent second before the distraction even begins? Here is a quiet truth about our daily habits. Most of us are living in a state of constant, unthinking reaction. You sit down to do something meaningful or difficult. You are determined to stay focused. But suddenly, the task feels heavy. A quiet discomfort rises in your chest. Perhaps it is simple boredom, or perhaps it is a hidden fear that your work will not be good enough. And before you are even consciously aware of it, your hand has reached for an escape. You have opened a new window. You have picked up your phone. You have looked away. It feels as though you have no control over this movement. It feels like an invisible reflex, pulling you away from your life the exact moment tension appears. Buddhist wisdom teaches that much of our suffering is born from this blind reaction. We are conditioned to immediately obey every impulse that rises in the mind. If we feel an itch, we scratch it. If we feel restless, we run. But one of the deepest lessons of Buddhism is discovering the sacred space between a feeling and an action. Mindfulness is not about preventing the urge to escape from arriving. It is about stretching that tiny, fragile fraction of a second into a quiet, open space. It is the profound realization that a thought is just an invitation, not a command. Imagine sitting alone in a quiet, softly lit room. Suddenly, outside the heavy wooden door, a loud knocking begins. The knocking is urgent, persistent, and demanding. If you are living without awareness, you will instantly leap from your chair, rush to the door, and throw it open, allowing whatever is out there to rush into your peaceful space. But what if you simply stayed in your chair? What if you listened to the loud knocking, felt the vibration of the wood, and remembered that you hold the key? The visitor cannot force the door open. They can only knock. The sudden urge to be distracted is simply a loud knock on the door of your mind. When your work becomes difficult, when the silence of the room feels too lonely, or when you feel the heavy pressure of falling behind in life, the knocking begins. The craving to seek the comforting noise of a screen, to abandon your task, to lose yourself in an easier world. It feels overwhelming. And for years, you have been jumping out of your chair to answer it, abandoning your own focus just to silence the noise. Think about your own life. What would happen if you heard the knock but chose not to stand up? What are you afraid you will feel if you simply let the urge echo in the hallway for a few moments, unanswered? Is the temporary discomfort of sitting with that urge truly worse than the crushing regret of another lost afternoon? You are not powerless. The next time the urge to escape rises, do not panic. Do not fight it, but do not blindly obey it either. Pause, breathe, sit perfectly still for just 3 deep breaths. Let the feeling of the urge wash over you. Let the knocking echo. Observe the physical tension in your hands and the sudden restlessness in your chest without trying to change it. Stop trying to fight the visitor and simply choose not to turn the handle. You will find that most urges, when they are not immediately fed, will eventually grow tired and quietly walk away. Because true emotional control is not about eliminating the noise of the world. It is about choosing what you invite inside. But to make this choice consistently, we must redefine what our daily effort actually looks like. And this leads us to the gentle truth of right effort. 7. Right effort and gentle discipline. There is a strange kind of freedom in finally realizing that you do not have to break yourself to be disciplined. We live in a world that glorifies exhaustion. We are told that success requires relentless, grinding force. So, when you try to build better habits, you approach your own mind like a tyrant. You create massive, impossible tasks. You expect yourself to instantly transform from someone who struggles with distraction into a flawless, unyielding machine of productivity. And when you inevitably fail to maintain this extreme intensity, you tell yourself you simply did not try hard enough. You assume that your effort was flawed because it did not hurt enough. But here is the truth. Force is not the same as strength, and punishment is not the same as discipline. In Buddhist thought, there is a profound teaching known as right effort. Right effort does not mean maximum effort. It does not mean pushing yourself until you collapse under the weight of your own expectations. It is about balance. It is the steady, sustainable energy that naturally flows when you stop fighting your own humanity. Buddhism teaches that true discipline is not a harsh, jagged peak you must painfully climb every single day. It is a quiet, continuous practice of gentle realignment. Imagine a person trying to build a fire on a cold, dark night. They hold a tiny, fragile spark in their hands. But because they are so desperate for warmth, they immediately throw massive, heavy logs onto the spark. They pile on too much weight, demanding a blazing fire instantly. Instead of growing, the spark is completely smothered. The person is left shivering in the dark, believing they are incapable of making a fire, when in truth, they simply gave the spark no room to breathe. This is what you do when you demand instant, perfect discipline from yourself. You take the fragile spark of your daily energy and you crush it beneath the massive, heavy logs of your own expectations. You tell yourself that you must work for 8 unbroken hours, or that you must finish a massive project in a single afternoon. You smother your own motivation with pressure. And when the spark naturally goes out, and you find yourself staring blankly at a screen or lost in distraction, you blame yourself for being cold. Think about your own life. How many times have you set a goal so large and heavy that simply looking at it made you want to run away? Is your daily routine built to support you, or is it designed to test and punish you? What if your lack of focus is not a lack of willpower, but simply a sign that the logs you are throwing on the fire are too heavy? You do not need to build a raging bonfire in a single moment. The next time you sit down to work, after a long period of distraction, lower your demands. Pause, breathe. Do not demand absolute perfection for the rest of the day. Just place one small piece of wood on the fire. Tell yourself you will simply focus for 10 gentle minutes. No pressure, no threats. Just one quiet, honest effort. Let the effort be small. Let it be manageable. Because discipline is not a weapon you use to punish the parts of you that struggle. It is a quiet, daily act of tending to your own light. But to truly change your relationship with this effort, you must learn to change the very reason why you are working in the first place. And this leads us to the quiet power of compassionate action. 8. Action born from compassion. What if the real reason you keep running away from your tasks is because your tasks have become a place of silent punishment? Most people do not realize that the energy they bring to their work is often rooted in deep, unspoken fear. You sit down to complete a project, study, or build a better future, but the underlying motivation is painfully heavy. You are working to avoid being a failure. You are working to prove to others that you are not lazy. You are trying to outrun the terrifying feeling of being left behind in life. And because the work is fueled by this dark, heavy energy of inadequacy, your mind naturally wants to escape it. Work becomes a place where you are constantly judged, where the inner critic waits to point out every flaw. It is no wonder your spirit seeks the numbing shelter of distraction. Buddhist wisdom offers a quiet, profound shift in how we approach our daily actions. It teaches us the power of right intention, rooted deeply in compassion. In Buddhist thought, actions born from fear, aversion, or shame are bound to create more suffering. They tighten the mind. They make the heart heavy. But actions born from compassion, from a genuine desire to care for yourself and your future, create a spacious, peaceful mind. Discipline is no longer about forcing yourself to be productive to prove your worth. It becomes an act of profound self-respect. Imagine two people tasked with planting a garden in a hard, barren field. The first person plants the seeds out of sheer terror of starving in the winter. They strike the ground violently with their tools, cursing the dry earth, sweating in panic, hating every moment of the labor. The second person plants the exact same seeds in the exact same earth, but they do it because they deeply value the idea of the harvest. They work carefully, understanding the soil, moving with a quiet sense of purpose. Both people are doing the exact same work, but the first person is destroying their spirit, while the second is nourishing it. Think about your own life. When you sit down to focus, which gardener are you? Are you working out of a desperate fear of failing? Are you using the heavy whip of shame to force your hands to move? Or are you working because you genuinely care about the person you are becoming? When you build your discipline on a foundation of self-hatred, the foundation will eventually crack. The pressure will become too much, and you will inevitably collapse into hours of empty escapism, just to find relief from your own cruelty. You cannot hate yourself into a peaceful life. Ask yourself, is this thought bringing you peace or feeding your fear? You do not have to work this way. The next time you begin a task and feel that familiar, heavy resistance rising in your chest, do not force it. Pause, breathe, soften your shoulders, change the energy behind the action. Silently tell yourself, I am not doing this to punish myself for yesterday. I am doing this to care for myself tomorrow. Do your part. Then release the heavy fear of failure. Let the action come from a quiet place of respect for your own time and your own peace, because action born from fear will always drain you. But action born from compassion will quietly sustain you. And as this gentle shift begins to take hold, you will realize that the final step of true discipline is not about reaching a perfect destination. It is simply about learning how to return. 9. Returning home to yourself. Imagine the exact scenario we spoke of at the very beginning. You look up from a screen, or you suddenly wake up from a deep daydream. The room has grown dark. The afternoon has silently vanished. You did not accomplish the things you firmly promised yourself you would do, but this time, something is profoundly different. The heavy, familiar voice of shame does not arrive. You do not reach for the second arrow to pierce your own heart. You do not instantly declare the entire day a ruined failure. Instead, you simply sit in the quiet room. You take a slow, deep breath. You feel the ground beneath your feet. You look at the lost hours, not with burning self-hatred, but with a gentle, silent understanding. You realize that your mind was tired. You realize the spark simply needed room to breathe. And with a calm, quiet grace, you stand up and choose to begin again. This is what it means to finally drop the weapon. For years, you believed that inner peace was a reward you would only receive after you achieved flawless discipline. You thought that if you could just control your mind perfectly, force your absolute focus, and never waste another second, you would finally be worthy of rest. But you have learned the quiet truth. Peace is not the ultimate prize at the end of a brutal war against yourself. Peace is the very foundation you must build upon. You cannot build a disciplined, meaningful life on a foundation of self-disgust. Buddhist wisdom gently reminds us that everything in this life is in a constant state of returning. The breath leaves the body, and it returns. The tide pulls away from the shore, and it eventually returns. Your mind will naturally wander into distraction, into fear, into escapism. That is simply the unbending nature of the tide. The tragedy is not that you drifted away. The tragedy only occurs when you are too ashamed to allow yourself to return. Think about the heavy armor you have been wearing for so long. Think about the exhausting energy it takes to constantly judge every mistake, every lost hour, every moment of weakness. You have been carrying a massive mountain of guilt, believing it was the only thing keeping you moving forward. But the mountain is not protecting you. It is only crushing you. You do not need to prove your worth by never failing. You do not need to use a whip to guide your own spirit. Let the river flow around the rocks. Let the loud knocking of your urges echo and slowly fade in the empty hallway. Let the dark clouds drift across the vast, open sky of your mind without throwing stones at them. Do not hate the parts of you that desperately seek rest. Understand them, comfort them, and then gently guide them back to the work that actually matters. Every single moment is a brand new beginning. If you lose an hour, let it go. If you lose an entire day, let it go. Do not let the ghost of yesterday dictate the reality of this very second. You are always allowed to start over. And you are always allowed to do it with kindness. If these lessons touched your heart, share this video with someone who may need a little more peace today. The way back is always open.